The weapon had waited for 11,000 years. It rested on a stone platform in the heart of Velith Prime, a planet that existed for only one purpose. The entire world was a temple. Mountains had been carved into halls. Oceans had been drained to make room for prayer chambers. Billions of beings had worked for centuries to build this place, and all of it existed for one reason: to house the weapon called the God's Bane. The God's Bane was not a normal weapon. It was a long blade attached to a shaft of black metal, but its shape seemed wrong. When someone looked at it directly, their eyes hurt. The angles did not make sense. The blade seemed to curve in directions that should not exist. It glowed with a cold silver light that made the air around it hum and vibrate. The old story said it had been forged during the God War, when beings of immense power had fought across the stars. A dying god had poured its hatred, its rage, and its final breath into this weapon. The God's Bane had been made to kill gods. It had succeeded. And then it had waited for a new Wielder. The Keepers of the Accord guarded the weapon. They were an ancient order made up of 17 different species from across the galaxy. Some of them had 4 arms. Some had no eyes. Some were made of living crystal. They came from different worlds and believed different things. But they all agreed on one truth: the God's Bane was the most dangerous object in the universe, and it could not be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. The problem was that the weapon had opinions about this. Every 100 years, the Keepers allowed champions to attempt the claiming. Warriors, monks, and heroes from across the galaxy would come to Velith Prime. They would walk down the long corridor to the weapons chamber. They would reach out and try to lift it. The weapon always refused. Sometimes it simply did nothing. The champion would grab the handle, pull with all their strength, and the weapon would not move. It would sit on its platform like a mountain, impossible to shift. These were the lucky ones. They walked away with nothing but shame. Other times, the weapon responded with violence. It would send a pulse of energy through the champion's body that turned their blood to fire. It would fill their minds with visions of dying stars until they went mad. It would erase them from existence so completely that even the memory of their names faded from the minds of those who had known them. The walls of the corridor leading to the Foley Sudain to the Beyond weapons chamber were covered in carved names. 4,217 names. Each one was a champion who had tried and failed. Each one had been considered the greatest of their generation. The Velthari had sent their Mindlords, beings who could move planets with their thoughts. The weapon had shattered their minds like glass. The Kreth had sent their gene-forged berserkers, warriors who had been designed in laboratories to be perfect killing machines. The weapon had reduced them to ash. The Silith had sent their enlightened monks, beings who had achieved perfect peace through 10,000 years of meditation. The weapon had shown them something that made them scream until their hearts stopped. 300 years ago, a Kreth warlord named Thesan the Unconquered had attempted the claiming. Thesan had conquered 40 star systems. He had killed 3 members of his own species who had been modified to be physically perfect. He feared nothing and no one. When he touched the weapon, he burned from the inside out. His ashes still marked the floor of the chamber, a gray stain that the Keepers refused to clean. It served as a warning. After Thesan, the attempts had stopped. The great species of the galaxy decided that the God's Bane was a relic of a dead age. It had been made for a war that was over. Perhaps no wielder existed. Perhaps no wielder was meant to exist. The weapon would sit in its temple forever, watched by the Keepers, touched by no one. The Keepers accepted this. Their purpose shifted. They were no longer searching for a worthy wielder. They were simply making sure that no one foolish enough to try would reach the weapon. They built more defenses. They added more tests. They made the journey to the weapons chamber, longer and more difficult thought, and then the humans arrived. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 40 years ago. In the long history of the cosmos, this was nothing. A blink, a single breath. The great species had been traveling between stars for millions of years. Humans had barely learned to leave their own planet. The other species did not think much of humans. They were small and soft. They had no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or poison. They could not survive in vacuum or breathe underwater or see in the dark. They had no psychic abilities. They could not regenerate lost limbs. By every measure that mattered, they were one of the weakest species in the galaxy. They were clever, the other species admitted. They made good tools. They adapted quickly to new environments. They bred fast and spread faster. In 40 years, they had established colonies on 100 worlds. They were useful as workers and traders, but they were not special. When the human ambassador requested permission to send a candidate to attempt the claiming, the Keeper Archon almost laughed. The Archon was a being of living stone, ancient and patient. He had watched hundreds of champions fail. He had seen the greatest warriors in the galaxy reduced to screaming husks, and now the humans wanted to try. The Archon consulted with the other keepers. They discussed the request for many hours. Some wanted to refuse. The humans would only embarrass themselves. Worse, they might anger the weapon. The Dodgebane had been quiet for 300 years. What if a human attempt woke it up? What if it decided to punish this insult by destroying the temple? By destroying the planet? Others argued that the humans had the right to try. The accord was clear. Any species could send a champion. The keepers could not refuse based on their own judgment of worthiness. That was the weapon's job. In the end, they agreed to allow it. The humans would send their champion. The champion would fail, and humanity would learn what the rest of the galaxy already knew. Some things were beyond them. Some heights could not be climbed. Some weapons could not be lifted. The keepers sent their acceptance to the human ambassador. They did not know that they had just changed the course of galactic history. The shuttle landed on Velith Prime on a gray morning. The sky was the color of old metal, and the air smelled like dust and ancient stone. A single human walked down the landing ramp and stepped onto the surface of the temple world. Her name was Mira Okonkwo, and she was not what anyone expected. The keepers had prepared for a warrior. They had cleared the great hall and assembled an honor guard of their finest soldiers. They had polished the ceremonial weapons and lit the ancient torches. They were ready to receive a human champion, someone who would at least look impressive before they failed. Instead, they got Myra. She was 34 years old, of medium height, with dark skin and short black hair that was starting to show threads of gray. She wore simple clothes, the kind that workers wore on mining ships. She carried a small bag over one shoulder. She looked around the great hall with mild interest, the way someone might look at an unusual rock formation. The Keeper Archon stepped forward to greet her. He towered over the human woman, his body made of gray stone that had been shaped by millions of years of patient growth. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied her. "I am the Archon of the Keepers," he said. "I welcome you to Velith Prime. You are the human champion?" "I suppose I am," Myra said. "Thank you for having me." The Archon waited for more. Champions usually gave speeches at this point. They talked about their training, their victories, their destiny. They boasted about the enemies they had defeated and the challenges they had overcome. They explained why they, out of all the beings in the galaxy, deserved to wield the god's bane. Myra said nothing else. She just stood there, looking patient. "May I ask about your background?" The Archon said. "Your training? Your qualifications?" "I'm a geological surveyor," Myra said. "I work for a mining company on Mars. I study rocks mostly. Sometimes I find valuable minerals. Sometimes I don't. The Archon's stone face could not show expression, but if it could, it would have shown confusion. You are not a warrior? No. You have no combat training? I took a self-defense class once. I wasn't very good at it. No psychic abilities? No genetic enhancements? No special technology? No. I'm just a regular person. The Archon did not know what to say. In 11,000 years, no one like this had ever attempted the claiming. The champions who came to Velith Prime were the best of the best. They had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. They had trained their bodies and minds to perfection. They had undergone rituals and modifications that pushed them beyond the limits of their species. This woman studied rocks. Why do you wish to attempt the claiming? The Archon asked. Mira thought about the question for a moment. Because you said anyone could try, she said. And someone should. You understand that you will almost certainly die. Yes, the weapon has killed 4,000 champions. Beings far more powerful than you. Beings who had spent centuries preparing for this moment. They all failed. What makes you think you will succeed? Mira looked at the Archon with calm, steady eyes. I don't think I'll succeed, she said. I don't expect to. But I thought I should try anyway. The Archon felt something strange. It was a feeling his species did not have a word for. Later, he would learn that humans called it unease. It was the sense that something important was happening, something he did not understand. Most champions come here full of certainty, the Archon said. They believe they are destined to succeed. They believe the weapon was waiting for them. You have no such belief? No, Myra said. I don't believe in destiny. I believe in trying things and seeing what happens. The Archon consulted with the other keepers through their mental link. They shared their confusion and their concerns. This was unprecedented. This woman had no qualifications. She had no special abilities. She was, by every measure they could apply, completely ordinary. Some of the keepers wanted to send her away. This was a waste of time. The weapon would ignore her, and they would have allowed a spectacle for nothing. Others argued that they had already granted permission. They could not take it back without breaking the accord. In the end, they decided to proceed. The human would attempt the claiming. She would fail, and then she would go home, and everything would return to normal. The Archon led Mira through the temple. They walked down corridors that had been carved from living rock, past chambers where ancient ceremonies had been performed, through halls where the names of dead champions covered every surface. Mira looked at the names as they passed. She did not seem afraid. She did not seem excited. She just looked curious. Do you have family? The Archon asked as they walked. A daughter, Myra said. Her name is Adaze. She's 7. You left your daughter to come here? To attempt something that will likely kill you? Mira was quiet for a moment. I thought about that a lot, she said. I almost didn't come, but I decided that I would rather show her that it's worth trying difficult things, even if you might fail. I left her a message explaining why I came. I hope she understands. They reached the final corridor. At the end, the Godsbane waited on its platform, glowing with cold silver light. The air hummed with power. The Archon could feel the weapon's presence pressing against his mind, ancient and patient and terribly aware. This is where I leave you, the Archon said. You must walk the rest of the way alone. Myra nodded. Thank you for your help. I hope you survive, the Archon said, and he was surprised to find that he meant it. Myra smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. Me too, she said, and then she turned and walked toward the weapon, her footsteps echoing in the ancient hall. The corridor stretched before her like the throat of some vast beast. The walls were black stone, polished smooth by thousands of years of careful attention. Luminescent moss grew in the cracks, casting a pale green glow that made everything look like it was underwater. The names of dead champions covered every surface, carved deep into the rock. Some of the names were in languages Myra could not read. Some were in scripts that hurt her eyes to look at. She walked slowly, reading the names as she passed. Thiessen the Unconquered, Vaxivle of the Thousand Minds, Brother Silence of the Empty Temple, Odzit of the Empty Temple, Krath who broke worlds. Each name had a small symbol beside it, indicating how the champion had died. A flame for burning, a spiral for madness, an empty circle for erasure. Myra counted the empty circles. There were hundreds of them, hundreds of beings who had been so thoroughly destroyed that nothing remained. Not their bodies, not their memories, not even the echo of their existence. She kept walking. The keepers had placed observation devices throughout the corridor. 17 species watched through remote sensors. Their attention focused on this small human woman as she made her way toward the most dangerous object in the universe. The Velthari watched with their vast psychic minds. The Kreth watched with eyes that could see heat and radiation. The Silith watched with senses that could detect the flow of cosmic energy. None of them expected her to succeed. They were watching the way scientists watch an experiment. They were curious about how she would die. The weapon grew larger as Mira approached. Or perhaps it stayed the same size, and space itself bent around it. The Dodgebane did not follow normal rules. It existed in ways that physical matter was not supposed to exist. Looking at it too long made Myra's head ache, so she looked at the floor instead. Watching her own feet move across the ancient stone, she thought about Mars. She had lived there for 15 years, ever since the mining company had offered her a job. The red planet had become home. She knew the way the dust storms rolled across the plains. She knew the color of the sky at sunset, when the thin atmosphere turned everything pink and orange. She knew the sound of the wind howling against the habitat domes. She thought about her daughter. Adaze had her father's laugh and her mother's stubbornness. She loved dinosaurs and spaceships and a cartoon about a singing robot. She was learning to read, sounding out words with fierce concentration, her small face tight with effort. Last week, she had read an entire picture book by herself, and she had been so proud that she made Myra listen to her read it 3 more times. She thought about her mother's garden. It was a small thing, just a collection of hydroponic trays in a corner of the habitat. But her mother had made tomatoes grow there, somehow. Real tomatoes, red and round and bursting with juice. Every time Myra visited, her mother gave her a tomato to take home. It was a small miracle. Life growing in a place where life should not exist. Mira stopped 3 meters from the weapon. The Godsbane pulsed with cold light. The air around it vibrated like a plucked string. Mira could feel pressure against her mind, something vast and ancient pressing at the edges of her thoughts. It was not painful. It was just present, like standing in strong wind. She looked at the weapon, really looked at it, letting her eyes trace its impossible shape. It was beautiful, she realized. Terrible and beautiful. Someone had made this thing with incredible skill and care. Someone had poured everything they had into its creation. It was a work of art as much as it was a weapon. "Hello," she said quietly. The weapon's pulse changed. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable. A slight shift in rhythm, like a heart skipping a beat. The observers in their distant stations leaned forward. The keepers held their breath. For the first time in 300 years, the Godsbane had responded to a potential Wielder. Nyra did not notice. She was still looking at the weapon, thinking about the being who had made it. A dying god, the story said. Someone in terrible pain, pouring their last moments into this creation. She wondered if they had been angry or sad or afraid. She wondered if they had known what would happen to all the champions who tried to claim their work. "I'm sorry," she said, "for whatever happened to you." The weapon pulsed again, faster this time. Something was waking up inside it, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. The observers began to panic. The keepers sent emergency signals. Something was happening, something unprecedented. The weapon was responding to this human in ways it had never responded to anyone before. Myra stepped forward. She did not charge. She did not run. She did not approach with weapons raised or prayers on her lips. She just walked, calm and steady, the way she walked across the Martian plains when she was surveying a new site. One foot in front of the other, simple, patient, unhurried. She reached the platform where the weapon rested. Up close, the impossible angles were even worse. Her eyes could not make sense of what they were seeing. The blade seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, folding through space in ways that made her stomach lurch. Myra took a breath. She thought about a daze. She thought about tomatoes growing in hydroponic trays. She thought about the red dust of Mars and the sound of the wind dot, and then she reached out and wrapped her fingers around the handle of the God's Bane. The moment her fingers touched the handle, the world disappeared. Myra found herself floating in darkness. Not the darkness of a room without light, but the darkness of space itself. Stars burned around her, distant and cold. She could feel herself expanding, spreading outward, becoming something larger than a single human body. And she could feel the weapon dot. It was inside her mind now, moving through her thoughts like a hand moving through water. It touched her memories and examined her fears. It looked at everything she was, everything she had ever been, everything she might become. This was the test that had broken 4,000 champions. The God's Bane did not test strength. It had examined warriors who could shatter moons with their bare hands. It had measured beings who could lift mountains and swim through the cores of stars. Physical power meant nothing to it. It had been forged by a god. Mortal strength was meaningless. The weapon did not test purity. It had looked into the souls of monks who had achieved perfect enlightenment. It had examined beings who had spent 10,000 years purifying their spirits, removing every trace of anger and greed and desire. Moral perfection meant nothing to it. Purity was just another form of hunger, a desperate need to be good enough. The weapon did not test worthiness. It had judged heroes whose names were sung across 1,000 worlds. It had measured beings who had saved entire civilizations, who had given everything they had in service to others. Heroic deeds meant nothing to it. Worthiness was just another form of pride. A need to prove oneself to the universe. The God's Bane tested something else entirely. It tested whether a wielder could carry it without being consumed. The weapon had been forged from rage. It was hatred made solid, fury given form. Inside it burned the dying screams of a god, endless and terrible. Any being who touched it would feel that rage pour into them. They would feel the god's pain and anger flooding through their mind like fire. Most beings could not survive this. The rage overwhelmed them. It found their own anger and fed on it, growing larger and hotter until it burned them from the inside out. The weapon did not kill champions. Champions killed themselves. Their own dark emotions amplified until they became destructive. The Kreth Berserkers had been easy. They were made of anger. The weapon had simply shown them what they already were, and they had burned. The Velthari Minlords had been almost as easy. For all their mental discipline, they carried deep wells of pride. The weapon had found that pride and twisted it, turning their own sense of superiority into a fire that consumed them. Even the Silith monks had failed. Their perfect peace was built on a foundation of fear. Fear of imperfection. Fear of unworthiness. Fear of being found lacking. The weapon had found that fear and shown them that everything they had worked for was a lie, and they had broken. Now the weapon moved through Myra's mind. Searching for her weakness, it looked for anger. It found some. Myra had been angry many times in her life. She had been angry at unfair bosses and cruel systems, and the way the universe sometimes seemed designed to hurt people. But her anger was small and scattered, like sparks from a fire that had never really caught. It did not consume her. It did not define her. She felt it, and then let it go. The weapon looked for pride. It found less. Myra did not think she was special. She did not believe she deserved to succeed where others had failed. She was just a person who had decided to try something difficult. If she failed, she would not be surprised. If she succeeded, she would not claim to have earned it. The weapon looked for fear. It found the expected things. Fear of pain. Fear of death. Fear of leaving her daughter alone. But these fears did not control Myra. She had made peace with them long ago. She knew she might die. She had accepted it. The fear was there, but it sat quietly in the corner of her mind, not screaming for attention. The weapon went deeper. It looked for the hunger that drove every champion, the desperate need to succeed, the burning desire to prove themselves, the absolute certainty that they were meant for greatness. It did not find this in Myra. Instead, it found something strange, something it had never encountered in 11,000 years of searching. It found silence, not the silence of emptiness. Myra was full of thoughts and feelings and memories. She was alive in every way that mattered. But underneath all of that activity, at the very core of her being, there was a stillness. A quiet place where nothing demanded attention. A calm center that simply existed, without needing to prove anything or achieve anything or become anything. She was content, not happy all the time, not free from problems, not living a perfect life, but content in a way that the weapon had never seen. She had enough. She wanted more, as everyone does, but she did not need more. She could lose everything and still be herself. She could fail completely and still be at peace. The weapon showed her the dying god's rage. It poured 11,000 years of fury into her mind. It tried to find something that would catch fire. Myra felt the rage wash over her. It was terrible. It was overwhelming. It was pain beyond anything she had ever experienced. And then it passed through her and kept going. Like water through a net. She did not fight it. She did not resist it. She simply let it flow, the way she let difficult feelings flow through her without holding on to them. The rage had nothing to grab. There was no fuel for the fire. There was only that quiet center, patient and still, waiting for the storm to pass. The weapon stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Myra floated in darkness, surrounded by stars, wondering if this was what death felt like. Then she felt something change. The weapon was not attacking anymore. It was not testing. It was doing something else. It was accepting. The darkness broke apart. The stars dissolved. Myra felt herself collapsing back into her body. Felt her fingers wrapped around the handle. Felt the solid ground beneath her feet. And she felt the weapon reshape itself for her. Light exploded through the chamber. The light was visible from orbit. Ships in the system turned their sensors toward Velith Prime. Stations that had been quietly watching for centuries sent emergency alerts to their homeworlds. Something had happened. Something impossible. The temple that had stood unchanged for 11,000 years was blazing with silver fire. When the light faded, Myra Okonkwo stood in the chamber holding the Godsbane. The weapon had changed. Its impossible angles had smoothed into something her eyes could understand. The blade still curved in ways that seemed wrong, but now it was a wrongness she could look at without pain. The cold silver light had dimmed to a gentle glow that pulsed slowly, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. The handle fit her hand perfectly. It felt like it had always been meant to be there. Mira looked down at the weapon. She felt its presence in her mind, the ancient rage that still burned at its core. But the rage was quiet now, contained. It did not press against her thoughts or try to consume her. It simply existed, waiting. The Keeper Archon was the first to enter the chamber. He moved slowly, his stone body trembling in a way Myra did not understand. His 4 eyes were wide, and something like tears ran down his rocky face. He fell to his knees before her. "It is done," he said. "After 11,000 years. It is done." Myra did not know what to say. She was tired. Her head ached. She wanted to sit down and drink some water and maybe sleep for a very long time. "Can I go home now?" she asked. The Archon looked up at her. He seemed confused by the question. "You are the wielder of the God's Bane," he said. "You hold the power to destroy gods. Entire civilizations will kneel before you. The galaxy itself will reshape around your will." "That's nice," Myra said. "But I have a job. And my daughter's birthday is next month." News traveled fast. Within hours, every major civilization in the galaxy knew what had happened. A human had claimed the God's Bane. An unremarkable woman from a mining colony on Mars had succeeded where the greatest champions of 17 species had failed. The reactions were immediate and intense. The Kreth sent warships. They surrounded Veloth Prime and demanded that the humans surrender the weapon. It belonged to a proper warrior, they said. Someone who would use it as it was meant to be used. Not some soft, weak creature who studied rocks. Mira met with their ambassador in the Great Hall. He was 8 feet tall, covered in scales and scars, his body built for violence. He towered over her, trying to intimidate her with his size. "Give us the weapon," he growled, "or we will take it." Myra looked up at him calmly. "No," she said. "You cannot refuse. We are the Kreth Empire. We have conquered 40 star systems. We have armies that could crush your entire species." "That's impressive," Myra said. But the answer is still no. The ambassador did not know how to respond. He was used to people being afraid of him. This small human woman seemed completely unbothered by his threats. "Do you not understand what you hold?" he demanded. "With the God's Bane, you could rule the galaxy. You could destroy anyone who opposed you. You could become a god yourself." "I don't want to rule the galaxy," Myra said. "I don't want to destroy anyone. And I definitely don't want to be a god." That sounds exhausting. The Kreth warships eventually left. They could not attack Veloth Prime without violating the Accord, and the weapon made Myra effectively untouchable anyway. Other ambassadors came in their place. The Velthari offered to make her the empress of a psychic collective. The Silith offered to build temples in her honor. Merchants offered wealth beyond imagination. Politicians offered alliances and marriages and entire planets. Myra listened to all of them with patient attention. Then she said the same thing to each one. "No, thank you." The keepers did not know what to make of her. For 11,000 years, they had imagined what the wielder of the God's Bane would be like. They had expected a hero who would unite the galaxy. A warrior who would lead them against some great threat. A leader who would use the weapon's power to reshape civilization. They had not expected a geological surveyor who just wanted to go home. "Do you not feel the weapon's call?" The Archon asked her one evening. "It was made for battle. It wants to be used." Myra considered the question. She could feel the God's Bane at the edge of her thoughts, always present, always aware. The ancient rage still burned inside it. Part of it wanted to be unleashed, to destroy something, to fulfill its purpose, but it did not demand this from her. It did not try to force her. It simply waited, patient as stone. "I think it's tired," Myra said. I think it's been waiting for a very long time, and now it just wants to rest. She returned to Mars 3 months after claiming the weapon. The journey had taken that long because everyone in the galaxy wanted to meet her, wanted to talk to her, wanted to understand how an ordinary human had done what gods and heroes could not. She answered their questions as best she could. She did not have grand explanations. She did not have wisdom to share. She had simply walked up to the weapon and picked it up. That was all her daughter was waiting for her when she landed. The days had grown taller in the months Mira had been away. She had learned to read longer words. She had lost a tooth and grown a new one. "Mom!" she shouted, running across the landing pad. "You're back!" Mira dropped to her knees and hugged her daughter. She held her tight, feeling the small warm body against her chest, smelling the familiar scent of her hair. "I missed you," Mira said. "I missed you too." "Did you really find a magic sword?" Mira laughed. "Something like that." The god's bane hung above her fireplace now. Its light had dimmed to a soft glow, barely brighter than a nightlight. Sometimes a days liked to sit and watch it pulse, making up stories about the ancient god who had made it. The galaxy still sent messengers. They still made offers and threats and pleas. They could not understand why Mira refused to use the weapon. They could not understand why she was content to return to her ordinary life, surveying rocks and raising her daughter and visiting her mother's garden. One ambassador, a Silith monk who had spent his entire life seeking enlightenment, asked her the question that everyone wanted to ask. "Why did the weapon choose you? What do you have that the rest of us lack?" Mira thought about it for a long time. She thought about the test the weapon had given her, the rage that had poured through her mind, the quiet place inside her that had let it pass. "I think," she said slowly, "it needed someone who didn't need it. Everyone else who came wanted something from the weapon. They wanted power or glory or to prove themselves. I didn't want anything. I just thought someone should try." The monk did not understand. Neither did anyone else, but the god's bane understood. It rested above the fireplace, its ancient rage quiet for the first time in 11,000 years. It had found what it was looking for. Not a hero, not a warrior, not someone who would use it to reshape the galaxy. Just a quiet woman who wanted nothing from it. And in that silence, both of them found peace.